Hello and welcome back to another Bean Report YouTube edition. We have a pretty packed slate of things to talk about here in this week's episode. We have the conclusion of the PWHL regular season took place last week. Playoffs start tomorrow, and at the moment we know who's playing who, but we'll see how they got there and, what's going on with how they got there in the final week. But anyway, we're going to jump right into first we're going to look at the scores from last week. And the ones of relevance were last Wednesday, the Ottawa Charge took on the Boston Fleet. And with a win there, Ottawa clinched a spot in the playoffs on Wednesday. Of course, we mentioned, and the game we're going to look at later is Ottawa versus Toronto. And that was a matchup between the 4 and 5 seeds. And if Ottawa had lost that game against Boston, then the game of Ottawa versus Toronto would have decided who made the final spot in the playoffs. But since Ottawa did win that first game on Wednesday against Boston, they clinched outright at that moment, meaning the game against Toronto didn't matter for seeding, didn't matter for who was going to make the final playoff spot. So the games of consequence were that one right there. Ottawa beat Boston 2-1, and with that loss right there for Boston, they did put themselves in a more difficult position to try and take over the Montreal Victoire for the first overall seed. So that game right there, 2-1 Ottawa over Boston. Boston then on our Saturday set when everybody played, Boston beat New York by a score of 4-0. Minnesota took on Vancouver, and it was Vancouver winning that one by a score of 4-3. And then clinching their number one spot in the playoffs, the Montreal Victoire beat the Seattle Torrent by a score of 2-1. But despite the fact that this game, the playoff implications for it were decided earlier in the week on Wednesday, we're still going to look at this 4-5 matchup between the Ottawa Charge and the Toronto Scepters. A good matchup, even though, again, the playoff implications were taken away in a previous game. But it's still a good matchup we're going to look at right now. 4-5 matchup here between the Ottawa Charge and the Toronto Scepters. Playoffs have already been decided, but still we're going to take a look at it here. Toronto looking to get something going. Phillips can't corral it, but it's a Claire Dalton shot that's going to be blocked and out of play. Ottawa on the attack, and that puck's going to bounce around, but Brooke Hobson with a big shot misses. Rebound Kava back to Katarova, and she puts it in for the first score of the game here. 15 minutes left in the second period. We're going to see the replay here. Big shot, bounces around. Kava, she's going to get it. Her puck's going to come around, and Katarova, she cleans up the mess and tucks that one into the back of the net. Early on into the second here, and Toronto just can't get it out of there. That pass is Sarah Wozniewicz, and she puts it in the back of the net, which is a nice move. We got to see that one on replay here as she gets it. Simple little move, but beautiful as it gets past the goalkeeper. One more time here. She gets it. Fakes left, goes right. Puts it in the back of the net. 4.5 minutes, Toronto down 2. They have an empty net here, and they're just trying to get anything going. They can't seem to clear it. Empty net. Alexa Vasco collects on that. Puts that one in the back of the net. Ottawa up 3-0 here as time expires. Gwyneth Phillips with a beautiful game in net. Shutout for her. Ottawa, they finished the season winning their last 4 games of the year. So as you can see, even though, again, the finals implications weren't there, Ottawa still, they are the playoff. They are the 4th spot in the playoffs. They still would have been there anyway. A 3-0 victory here over Toronto. Gwyneth Phillips was incredible in net. 41 shots on goal, 41 saves for her. On the other end, Reagan Kirk, she had only 28 out of 30 saves, letting 2 goals go by, and of course that final empty netter. Fiduza Katarova, she scored her 10th goal, reaching double digits for the Charge here. She had 3 shots in this game. Ottawa, they clinched the final spot in the playoffs with the 4th seed Toronto. They end 1 spot out in the 5th seed. So we move looking towards the playoffs here, and you see it came down very close between Montreal and Boston. Both teams finishing with 62 points, and you see the reason why Montreal makes it over the tiebreaker is in total they had 22 wins compared to Boston's 21 wins. The reason how they made it back up in points to end up tied, Boston had 2 more overtime losses, granting 1 point each, canceling out that 1 extra overtime win that Montreal had over Boston, which is, again, worth 2 points as well. So The points even out in the end, but because Montreal had more wins, it is Montreal Victoire as the 1 seed, Boston Fleet as the 2 seed. Minnesota, they finished in a comfortable 3rd seed, well ahead of 4th place in Ottawa, and pretty significantly behind Boston in 2nd. They finished 13, 3, 5, and 9, and it was the Ottawa Charge we mentioned multiple times by now, clinching the 4th spot in the playoffs. 9 wins, 8 overtime wins, 1 overtime loss, and 12 losses on the season. And in the bottom half, the 4 eliminated teams, Toronto, Vancouver, New York, and Seattle, with 38, 37, 36, and 31 points, respectively. So how the playoffs work in the PWHL is, as you can see, we've already shown that only 4 teams can make the playoffs. 2 rounds, semifinals, and finals. The number 1 seed gets to choose who their opponent is. I've seen this idea floated around in other sports, but this is the only sport where I've really seen it actually implemented. So the number 1 seed being the Montreal Victoire, they got to choose between either Minnesota and Ottawa as who they wanted to face in the first round, and then Boston would be subject to playing the other team who wasn't chosen. So a little breakdown of how these work. Both the semifinals and the finals, both rounds of the playoffs here, are best of 5, so first to 3 will advance, and then in the finals, first to 3 will win. How overtime works, no shootouts. It is 5-on-5, and they play until a goal is scored. And honestly, compared to NHL, I really like this rule. I like the fact of just keep playing, and don't bring it down to 3-on-3. Just keep playing 5-on-5 until somebody scores and somebody ends up winning. And I think that's a more fair way to show who really is the better team in that matchup. You can get lucky in shootouts. You can get unlucky in shootouts. In 5-on-5, it's just like the rest of the game. I just think it's the most fair way to decide who's going to move on. So as we mentioned, Montreal, they are the 1 seed. They get to host the first part of the first round. Who do they end up choosing? Montreal ended up choosing the 3 seed. Instead of going against a 4 seed, they chose the 3 seed, the Minnesota Frost. Throughout the regular season, Montreal faced Minnesota and Ottawa each 4 times. Against Ottawa, Montreal went 3-1 with a goal differential of 9 goals scored and 4 goals allowed. Against Minnesota, it was a clean sweep, 4-0. The goal differential that Montreal scored 12 goals against Minnesota's only 3. And you look at the last 2 matchups between Montreal and Minnesota. March 25th, Montreal beat Minnesota by a score of 3-0, and then March 1st, Montreal won 4-0. So 7-0 over their last 2 matchups. So with Montreal choosing Minnesota, Boston now as number 2 seed is subject to play the Ottawa Charge. These teams met up again 4 times throughout the regular season, and it was actually Ottawa taking the season series 3-1. Ottawa took the first matchup 3-2 back in December. Then they took the second matchup 2-1 in January. Boston got their only win of the year at a late February matchup by a score of 3-2. And then right before the regular season, the one we were mentioning that Ottawa clinched their playoff hopes on, they beat Boston by a score of 2-1. So going into this matchup, yes, it's a 2 versus a 4, but Ottawa's had Boston's number this season. Ottawa has done very well performing against Boston. So that'll be a very interesting series. These games will be starting very soon. Right now, obviously, we only have the first 2 games because we don't know if necessary games we're going to have at the moment. But game 1 for the Ottawa-Boston series will take place tomorrow, Thursday, April 30th at 7 o'clock. Game 2 will be on Saturday at 7. Montreal and Minnesota, their first game, game 1 will be Saturday at 2 o'clock, and then game 2 would be next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So game 1 for both series scheduled for Thursday for Ottawa and Boston, and then Saturday for Montreal and Minnesota. So we move now away from the PWHL, and we want to quickly talk about a little NBA basketball coverage, and there is some very big surprises that I've seen so far in this NBA playoffs. So right now we're going to start with the East, and the series we're going to look at is the Detroit Pistons taking on the Orlando Magic, and the Magic, of course, a play-in winner, and many just assumed that we're going to get rolled over by the Pistons. Right now, Orlando is up 3-1 over Detroit. Detroit, the number one seed, on the brink of elimination. And honestly, all of the wins have seemed fairly commanding for Orlando. They won game 1 by 11. They won game 2 by 8. And then they won game 3 by another 6 points. So, yes, the leads have gotten smaller, but still, I mean, Orlando has really controlled a lot of the time in this game. Detroit just not shooting very well at the moment. They're only shooting 27% from 3, only 41% from the 41% field goal percentage, and at the line only shooting 72%. So just not really the good production you want to see from the number 1 seed. And at this point, we might see our first upset of the playoffs, with Orlando stunning the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So the other series we looked at, so last week when we made this, Cleveland had a very commanding 2-2 lead over the Toronto Raptors. And I was making the claims, talking about how Toronto still can't win against Cleveland, even though LeBron's gone. Toronto has won 2 straight games. Toronto has now won the last 2 games of the series after falling behind 2-0, and they took game 2 by 22 points, and they took game 3. They took game 3 by 22 points. They took game 4 by a 4-point lead, but still, Cleveland Cavaliers honestly in trouble now after having a pretty hot start to now keep it even at 2 apiece. Our next series, we've had a lot of back and forth action in this one, and they had a game yesterday, and honestly, it's when the Hawks have won their 2 games, it has been very close. It's been a hard-fought battle, and you can see in the games that the reason why they lost was a combination of timely shooting, but just Nick collapses at certain pivotal moments in the game. But when the Knicks have won in this series, it's been very commanding. They won by 11 points in game 1, they won by 16 points in game 2, and they won by 29 points yesterday in game 3. So game 4 will be tomorrow, back in Atlanta, so we'll see what happens there. Knicks 1 game away from moving on to the next round. And then our final matchup in the Eastern Conference is the Philadelphia Sixers and the Boston Celtics. Joel Embiid came back. He played his second game yesterday. He had his appendicitis surgery only, I think, less than 3 weeks ago. So someone dealing with constant injuries throughout his career just met with a very unfortunate one in the form of appendicitis on the road towards the end of the season. But he played great yesterday. Sixers played great as a whole, kind of taking that lead in the second half, but they stay alive right now. Boston was up 3-1, Philly won, so now it's a 3-2 series. Game 6 coming back to Philadelphia. A potential Game 7 would be on Saturday back in Boston, but for the moment, only 1 game guaranteed, and that's Game 6 in Philadelphia between these 2 teams. Going over to the Western Conference, we have 2 teams moving on, and to no surprise, really, it's the Thunder and the Spurs. Thunder swept the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix, another play-in winner like the Magic, in a similar spot to them facing off on the 1 seed. But unlike the Magic, the Phoenix Suns have not gotten as lucky to be up ahead 3-1 at this point. Oklahoma City just kind of had their way with Phoenix winning that series, straight up sweeping. The next series between the 4-5 is the Lakers and the Rockets. Right now, the Lakers are up 3-1. LeBron just looks like, he doesn't look like a 41-year-old man. He looks like LeBron James has always looked. Game 4 is tonight in Los Angeles, so we'll see who wins that one. And then a very, very back-and-forth matchup between, some now unfortunate injury-riddled team. Minnesota Timberwolves lead the Denver Nuggets by a score of 3-2. Of course, now missing 2 of their very key contributors on that team. Dante DiVincenzo tore his Achilles, and he's going to 100% be out for the rest of the playoffs and part of maybe next season. Depends, maybe he has a Jason Tatum type recovery. And Anthony Edwards landed awkwardly in the last game and hyperextended his knee, and it's now reports are saying that he's going to miss several weeks. So very unfortunate for the Timberwolves, now missing out on 2 of their better key contributors and their, without a doubt, best player on the roster. But we'll see. Next game is tomorrow, and it's really just Minnesota has been giving Denver so many fits in this game. And then the last one, I mentioned how, not a surprise, San Antonio Spurs have defeated the Portland Trailblazers in 5 games. The only real game that San Antonio lost, or I guess you could say Portland won was more contributed to the fact of Victor Wembanyama fell and got a concussion. Regardless, when he's played, besides that time he missed with a concussion, Wemby has looked outstanding. He did miss one game. He's put up 21 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and he's averaged 4 blocks in this playoff run. So the Spurs have just looked absolutely great. And I think what really shows is you look at this team and you look at the box score of how they did in Game 5, and no one really sticks out more than the rest. De'Aaron Fox led the way with 21 points, but you look and all 5 starters are in double digits, and Dylan Harper off the bench was also in double digits. So any player with 25 or more minutes was in double digits. Julian Champagnie with 19, Wemby with 17, Fox with 21, Devin Vassell with 10, Stephon Castle with 15, and then Harper with 17. So really just a team working on all cylinders at this point, everybody contributing, everybody looking really well, and not one person taking over the game. And that shows good for a playoff run, that they're not reliant on one person who, if they have a bad night, then you can kind of kiss their hopes goodbye on that day. But say Wemby or Fox isn't having a good night, they have other people that can pick them up and help carry the load for that team. So Spurs, I don't know, it's the Spurs or Thunder who are most likely going to make it out of the West, and both those teams have already moved on in their first round matchups. Thunder, they'll take on the winner of the Lakers and Rockets series. We could have a winner for that series tonight. And then the Spurs, they'll take on the winner of the Nuggets and the Timberwolves matchup. And then that we could have a decision tomorrow night. If not, we'll have a decision later on whenever Game 7 would be, a potential Game 7 would be on Saturday. So that's the updated NBA playoffs in forms of like who's winning in each round. There's 3 games tonight. Orlando will be heading to Detroit to take on the Pistons. With a win tonight, Orlando wins and would move on. They would take on the winner of the Cavs and Raptors series, which is our next game, taking place at 7:30 today. That series tied at 2 apiece, so no winner can be determined tonight. There will have to be a Game 6. And then our final series, our 10 o'clock late night West Coast series. The Los Angeles Lakers are going to host the Houston Rockets. Lakers are up 3-1 in that series, so we could have 2 decisions tonight of teams moving on to the second round. It could be the Lakers and the Magic, but if either the Pistons or the Rockets do win and stave off elimination for the time being, there would be another game for that. So moving over towards baseball now, we've had recent news that early in the season, and 2 teams that you really expect to honestly make noise year in, year out, have fired their head coach. Philadelphia Phillies moving on from head coach Rob Thompson. Thompson was in his 5th year with the Phillies. He took over in 2022 for Joe Girardi. And in his time there, he had a 355 and 270 win-loss record, so a percentage of .568. I mean, besides 2022, where Thompson took place halfway through the year, every full season he coached, the Phillies were a 90-win team, 90 and 72 in 23, 95 and 67, and 96 and 66 in 2025. But this year, just off to an utterly abysmal start, 9 and 19 under Thompson, and you just see, and nothing is working well for the Phillies. 3rd worst ERA in the MLB with a 4.95 ERA. They middle of the pack, allowing home runs. Not even allowing many walks, they're just allowing the most hits in the MLB, and it's just not what you're used to seeing by the Philadelphia Phillies by any means. Opponents are hitting .280 against the Phillies. It's just not the type of execution you're used to seeing from a team like Philadelphia. And in terms on the offensive end, they're just not doing much. They have the 2nd worst batting average in the MLB at .223. The 3rd worst on base percentage in the MLB at .298. They're just not scoring runs. They have the 3rd least amount of RBIs. Just not hitting and not pitching well at all. Just a terrible combination for Philadelphia to start the season. And moving on from their head coach. And the second team moving on with their head coach is the Boston Red Sox. And not only are the Red Sox moving on with their head coach, they moved on with their entire coaching staff. Base coaches, hitting coach, pitching coach, strategy coach, bench coach, head coach, everybody gone, but the big one is Alex Cora. And this is a strange situation, as many of the Red Sox players, when trying to ask general manager Craig Breslow about it, he just was like, go out there and play baseball. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Which is kind of strange. But Red Sox clearinghouse, and you can see why. They, in the bottom half of the MLB in batting average, just not getting on base much. They have only hit 20 home runs so far this season, second least in the MLB. Just not scoring runs, not doing anything. And in terms of pitching, they have a middle of the line 4.2 ERA. Just not anything good at all for the Boston Red Sox, allowing teams hitting .243 against them. So it's just not winning games. Not winning games by any means for the Boston Red Sox. So those are the two teams that have moved on from their head coaches. And the teams I want to look at now are teams that I would call MLB's biggest surprises up until this point. We have 4 negative surprises, and then we have one team who have surprises in a positive direction, even though they're still last in their division. First off, we're going to start looking at, you guessed it, the New York Mets. New York Mets have just not looked good this MLB season so far. They currently sit at 10-19. They're last in the NL East. Currently have a negative 22 run differential. And for the Mets, it was highlighted by an 11-game losing streak. Of course, that has ended now. They won 2 games against Minnesota and then got swept by the Colorado Rockies. So you got back on track to then just completely derail that train once again. For the Mets, they're not hitting. They have the 4th lowest batting average in the league at .225. One of the three teams with a on base percentage below .300. Of course, they have the worst on base percentage in the entire league, and that's highlighted by the fact that they're just not walking. They have 86 walks on the year, which is good for 4th worst. Just not hitting home runs, not hitting the ball, period. And in terms of ERA, honestly, it's not horrible. They do have a top 10 ERA with a 3.87. They're holding opponents well. They're not getting on base. They're not hitting as much. They're not really scoring runs. Again, they're top 10 in most pitching stats. It's just the fact that the offense is just collapsing and the offense can't do anything. Mets currently last in the NL East. The next surprise we're going to look at is the Houston Astros, and they are currently 11-19, a minus 25 run differential, and they're last in the AL West. And the surprising part for Houston is they have the 4th best batting average in the league. They're currently hitting .260. In terms of RBIs and scoring runs, 4th best in the league. They have the 4th best offense. They have the 4th most hits. They have the most doubles. The top 10 in home runs, again, top 5 in scoring runs, but the problem is you look at the pitching. Houston Astros have the worst ERA in the league by, honestly, a mile. A 5.96 ERA is .7 higher than the next best team. Teams are hitting home runs off of them. Astros are leading the league in walks allowed. Just, by all means, have done terrible in terms of pitching. And it's a team that I think could get back on track at a certain point if they can start pitching well, because the offense is there. The offense is there to do some damage. It's just, you can't win games if you're letting up the most runs in the entire MLB. So our one team we're going to look at in a positive direction has been the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates are shocking everyone. Yes, they currently sit at last in the NL Central, but they're 16-14 with a plus 118 run differential. You look at the standings, the Pirates, again, at 16-14, they would be in first place in the AL West and the AL Central. It just so happens that they're in the best division in baseball, where all 5 teams have a win percentage over 500. Pittsburgh has looked great. They surprised everyone because Pittsburgh's usually just kind of a laughingstock and isn't considered in these top-end matters, but top 5 ERA in baseball with a 3.61. They've allowed the second least amount, tied for the least amount of home runs allowed with 23. They're not walking batters. They're not allowing hits. It's just, honestly, all things are going well in Pittsburgh right now. And in terms of offense, nothing amazing. A middle of the line, pretty average, batting average at 245. Hitting league average home runs, league average doubles. They're kind of league average across the board in terms of hitting. But it's just they're pitching really well. And the Pirates are honestly getting some good heat right now, as they're, again, still last in the NL Central, but over 500. And then the two last teams we're going to look at, the first one we're going to look at is the Kansas City Royals, currently sitting at 12-17, minus 19 run differential. They're last in the American League Central. And the Royals are just kind of a case of they're not hitting. They have their bottom 6 in terms of runs allowed. They aren't hitting many home runs. They're not getting on base that often. It's just low average, low on base percentage. Not really good numbers to see from Kansas City right now, and it also goes off they are allowing a lot of runs too. So it's a combination of they're not hitting and they're not pitching well. And you would think, because Kansas City moved their fences in this season, trying to get some more runs scored in their home ballpark, and Bobby Witt's been held homerless up until 2 days ago, where he's now hit 2 home runs in his past 2 consecutive games. So maybe Bobby Witt heating up a little bit here, but still, Kansas City just not in a position that many thought they would be. People thought after kind of a decent year 2 years ago, making the playoffs and then losing in the first round to the Yankees, and then a decent year last year, people thought that they could bounce back and have a good year this year, but just really not doing anything impressive, 12-17. And the last team we're going to look at is the reigning American League pennant winner, the Toronto Blue Jays, currently sitting at 13-16, minus 25 run differential. They are 4th place in the American League East, only ahead of the aforementioned Boston Red Sox. And for Toronto, it's just a case of, honestly, they're also not really hitting. I mean, their batting average is about league average, but their on-base percentage is in the bottom 5 worst in the MLB. And in terms of slugging as well, they're also in the bottom 10-ish. Just not hitting home runs, not really hitting extra bases that often, and just not scoring runs. But they're hitting the ball, but they're just not hitting the ball well, and they're not capitalizing on getting runners on base. And in terms of pitching, Toronto's been kind of in the bottom half of the league, a 4.31 ERA, just allowing league average home runs, but allowing too many runs, too many hits, a pretty high batting average for opponent batters. So those are the 5 teams that have surprised me. But the 4 teams that have surprised me in the weaker sense of the Mets, the Astros, the Royals, and the Blue Jays, teams that honestly I thought were going to perform well this year. The thing that I see is, honestly, the entire American League is just very lackluster and disappointing this year. Right now, the New York Yankees, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the cityless Athletics are the only 3 teams that have an above 500 record in the American League. 15 teams, 3 of them have an above 500 record. We look to the National League, night and day. 8 of the 15 teams, more than half of the National League, has a winning record. The Braves, the entire National League Central, the Reds, Cubs, Cardinals, Brewers, and Pirates, and then the Dodgers, Padres, and Diamondbacks. So there's less teams than not that are under 500. Where do you look at the American League, and it's only a couple teams, like Seattle Mariners off to a disappointing start. We already talked about the Astros. The Tigers, 15-15, they're even. Cleveland off to a slow start. Kansas City off to a slow start. The Orioles, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, all these teams off to a poor start. And besides really Kansas City and Pittsburgh on this graphic, and then you also throw in Boston and you throw in Philadelphia, but the Mets, the Astros, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, and the Phillies, those are teams that you're used to seeing being perennial teams that are fighting for playoff spots. And just these teams right now, yes, I know that we've only played about 30 games, 29 to 30 games in this young season, but it's strange to see these perennial powerhouses just not doing anything of substance so far this season. I expect a couple of these teams to maybe kick it into gear. I think the more likely ones are maybe the Toronto Blue Jays and the Houston Astros. Astros have the offense to do well, and Toronto has the base of an offense that can do well. Just these teams need to start pitching better and really just get it into gear in terms of cashing in on runs. And the last thing I want to talk about is a groundbreaking achievement in college baseball, and that was met by this woman right here, Olivia Pichardo. She's a member of the Brown University baseball team, and so back in 2023, Pichardo she broke the gender barrier in Division I baseball, and now offensively and in terms of pitching as well. So back in 2023, she pinch hit in the ninth inning of a game, and it was only one pitch at bat. She swung at the first one and proceeded to ground out, but she broke the gender barrier back in 2023. And then now we flash forward to this weekend, and in a 16-4 score against Cornell on Saturday, she came in with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth and retired the one batter that she faced. It was a 2-pitch at bat and proceeded to get Cornell's Tyler Bulow to ground out. So we now have Olivia Pichardo breaking the gender barrier in terms of being the first woman to play in college baseball Division I, and now she's the first one to get on the mound and throw an inning in college baseball. So if she has more playing time this year, we'll look to cover that and see how she goes and where she progresses in terms of playing this season. But I always like to talk about achievements like this, especially when someone's breaking a barrier, whether we talked about Jackie Robinson a couple weeks ago and breaking the color barrier, but maybe Olivia Pichardo here can influence more girls and more women to follow and play the sport that they love, being baseball. So I congratulate and I applaud Olivia Pichardo for breaking the gender barrier once again in college baseball. So a longer episode for us this week, of over half an hour, but there was a lot to talk about, a lot that I wanted to cover, a lot of playoffs, and I wanted to give a little bit of a deeper look into some of the teams that I thought have been really struggling in the MLB so far this season. But I've gone on long enough. I don't need to keep anybody here longer than they need to be. Thank you all for listening and watching to another multiple sports-filled episode. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you guys can all go outside and just enjoy the weather and really enjoy the fact that spring is fully blooming coming into session at this point. So again, thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.